Can you imagine opening your door on Christmas and finding 25 unexpected relatives ready to move in? I'm Linda, and when my daughter-in-law dropped that bomb, I did the unthinkable. I packed my bags and walked out. But what happened next left everyone stunned. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear. Good news, Linda. My family's flying in for Christmas. Just 25 of them. Brooke said it as though she were handing me a wrapped present with a satin bow, not dropping a boulder squarely in my lap. I was at the kitchen table of my ranch-style house in St. Augustine, Florida, the December sun slanting through the blinds in pale stripes. A peppermint candle sputtered on the counter, sending out a sweet note that clashed with the sour twist in my stomach. Publix grocery bags dangled from hooks near the mudroom door, half filled with paper towels and coffee I had bought for myself, not for an army of relatives. Above us, on the highest shelf, my good china rested in boxes I hadn't opened in years, hidden but never safe from Brooke's ambitions. She stood there in her heels, tapping against my tile like a woodpecker boring into old bark. Her hair was glossy, her nails lacquered, her smile stretched to the point of smugness. The way she perched on one hip made it clear this was not a request. This was an announcement, a proclamation, an edict. Ryan leaned against the fridge, his tie loosened from a day at the insurance office. He looked tired, but not from work, tired of being caught in the crossfire between the two women in his life. My son had perfected the role of middleman, soothing Brooke's sharp edges with half-hearted words, patting my hand with a sigh when things grew tense. Brooke launched into her list as though she were reading from a glossy magazine spread. 3 turkeys, Linda, at least. And your chocolate silk pie, of course. Everyone loves it. You'll need to decorate the house. String lights, garlands, something Instagram-worthy. Valeria loves a good backdrop. Oh, and don't forget the kids' table. You can make it cute with candy canes or gingerbread. Her voice dripped entitlement, each word landing on me like a command. Ryan's attempt at diplomacy came right on cue. Mom always makes Christmas perfect, he murmured, as though complimenting me would soften the blow, as though his flattery might lure me back into servitude. I set down my teacup carefully, the porcelain kissing the saucer with a sound sharper than I intended. That little clink sliced the air. I let the silence spread for just long enough that Brooke's smile faltered. Then calmly, I said, Perfect, because I won't be here. The words shocked even me with their clarity. Brooke blinked, her manicured hand tightening on the back of the chair. Her painted mouth opened, then closed, like a fish tossed on the dock. Excuse me? She finally managed. I said I won't be here, I repeated, steady as the peppermint flame across the counter. You can cook. You can decorate. You can host your 25 relatives. It isn't my responsibility. For the first time in years, I watched the color drain from her cheeks. Ryan straightened, running a hand through his hair. Mom, maybe we can... Brooke cut him off, her tone sharpening like her heels on my floor. Ryan won't allow this. That was the moment my spine, so often bent by compromise, refused to bow. I looked her straight in the eye and said, It isn't his house to allow. The words landed heavy, undeniable. The kitchen filled with silence so thick I could hear the refrigerator hum, the distant call of gulls over the marsh. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, as though my refusal were an embarrassment rather than a declaration of dignity. Brooke's stilettos tapped a frantic rhythm as she paced, her composure unraveling stitch by stitch. After all I've told them, she hissed, they're expecting a Christmas like no other. I've already promised turkey, pies, decor, the works. You can't just... I can, I interrupted softly. And I will. I thought of the unused suitcase upstairs in my closet, its airline tag still dangling from a trip I never took 2 years ago when Brooke decided my presence was essential for one of her events. That suitcase had become a quiet reminder, a symbol of choices deferred. This year, it would not gather dust. Brooke's stilettos clicked toward the counter, her hand reaching for her phone. She was already dialing reinforcements, summoning sympathy from her family, or pressure from my son. The sharp sound of her heels echoed like panic ricocheting off the walls. Ryan opened his mouth, but I was already rising from the table, steady and deliberate. The candle burned low, wax pooling like melted resolve. I smoothed my palm over the counter where so many lists had been written, menus planned, groceries tallied. Not this year. Without another word, I walked past them both, my footsteps quiet against the storm I had just unleashed. Brooke's heels struck the tile, her phone already at her ear, each click a metronome of desperation. The silence between us had cracked open, and I knew there was no going back. When people call you dramatic, show them numbers. The line arrived around midnight, sat itself at my desk, and waited for me to turn on the lamp. In the pale circle of light, my brass file box looked like a sensible handbag, scuffed corners, dependable clasp, the kind of thing a retired librarian trusts. Papers breathe if you listen. Ink, dust, consequence. I lifted the lid and the past rustled. "Put it in writing, dear," Mrs. Green had told me once, leaning on her cane and speaking like a former county housing clerk who had seen every kind of mess end up on a form. Phone calls vanish, paper does not. I labeled folders even when it made me feel fussy. Tonight, fussy was armor. On top sat taxes, clipped by year. Beneath, statements, utility bills, the folder coyly named House, and then a slimmer tab I didn't remember. Ryan, Messi. My handwriting, but with hesitation. I slid out the first statement. Purchases looked ordinary. Gas, groceries, until the header. Ryan Howell. The mailing address, however, was an unfamiliar P.O. box. The contact email wasn't his. The minimum payment auto-drafted from an account I didn't recognize. Down the page, the merchants went glossy. A Jacksonville boutique, an online luxury shoe site, a salon with prices that winked. The card was new, the balance growing like ivy. The next document was a personal loan application. A phrase rose like a flare, anticipated inheritance. There it sat, not bolded, but brazen. A lender's way of pretending future money counts as present sense. No lien yet, but the suggestion that my house might someday be leveraged curled its fingers at my door. A third stack contained boutique invoices, Brook Vega social media, with earnings that did not square with the spending. The math failed quietly, which is how most math fails. I thought of Brooke's stilettos tapping purchase orders into my tile. Host, impress, repeat. I did not cry. I outlined. Sticky flags, neat margins, duplicate prints pulled from the portal so the timestamps would be ours, not theirs. On a cover page, I wrote, in tidy blue ink, summary of accounts, origin, balance, behavior. Call me dramatic, argue with the table of contents. Wind pushed the chimes on the screened porch, slicing the dark into little equal pieces. For a moment, I pictured handing all of this to Ryan and watched, again, the scene where he rubbed his temples and said, "Surely there's an explanation. Explanations are plentiful. Respect is not." I chose precision over panic. By 8:15 the next morning, I was at the Truist branch I've used for years. The lobby smelled faintly of pine and toner. A sign in the window cheerfully listed Christmas Eve hours as if time itself could be scheduled. A teller named Shauna made sturdy copies and slid me heavy envelopes. When I asked, generally, how fraudulent accounts tend to announce themselves, she answered in careful scripts about credit pulls and paper trails. "Report, document, keep copies," she said. I liked Shauna. She respected the dignity of envelopes. At 10:30, I sat in Robert Hanley's office, where leather and coffee mix like good decisions. Robert does not gasp. He calibrates. I opened the file box like a stage set and walked him through the 3 beats: secret cards, inheritance language, income mismatch. We'll handle this, he said. We, not you, and pulled a yellow pad closer. We drafted a revocable living trust and moved the house into it with me as trustee. He added a recorded deed restriction, a single sentence that planted itself between my home and anyone's ambition. No sale or mortgage without my written consent. We attached residency by permission only, entry by invitation, no squatting by familiarity, no guest turning resident because time drifted. Holidays make people reckless, Robert said, tapping the clause. Paper makes them careful. We also reviewed my power of attorney and trimmed it to fit the present, not the past. On the way home, I stopped at Ace and bought a solid brass lock set. Back in my bedroom, I carried the good china in, piece by gentle piece. Gold-rimmed plates, the red band platter my grandmother used, linen napkins that still smelled faintly of starch. I nested them into a storage bin, closed the closet, and turned the new key. A clean click. I looped the key on a ribbon above my desk so it would watch me make lists and keep promises to myself. After lunch, I wrote emails, the kind that can stand up in daylight. Subject: family logistics and financial concerns. Recipients: Arturo Vega and Valeria Vega. I kept the tone steady, concerned, factual. I attached 3 PDFs, the card statement with the P.O. box, the loan page citing anticipated inheritance, and a 1-page comparison of Brooke's invoices versus reported income. I'm not asking you to intervene, I wrote. I'm asking for clarity before everyone travels. For you, for me. Send. I stepped onto the porch. December along the marsh is a soft, silver light Florida uses to pretend she has winter. The wind chimes answered a small breeze. I called Mrs. Green to thank her for the sentence that saved me time and heart. Write it down, then go where your peace is, she said, in that low laugh that belongs to widows who have outlasted several varieties of nonsense. Men learn slow. Girls in high heels learn loud. An hour later, my inbox chimed. From Arturo. Short, sharp. We will arrive early to speak with Brooke. Thank you for the documents. Then, from Valeria. Measured. Received. Appreciate the clarity. Available to talk? I replied, available today, traveling tomorrow. Boundaries are sentences, too. Marco texted in a knot. Hearing things about loans and your house. Call me. I didn't. He is not my obligation. Answers belong to the person who made the promises. The house seemed to stand taller as the afternoon went blue. I filed Robert's drafts, labeled tabs, tucked the trust into the safe with my passport. On the bookshelf, a Thanksgiving photo caught my eye. Brooke and me, mid-laugh, my pie balanced like an offering. I wiped an invisible smudge from the glass and set it back. Generosity had been a season. Precision would be the weather. Upstairs, the closet held my suitcase. Airline tags still dangling from a trip I had canceled because someone needed me. I pulled it forward and drew the zipper. The metal teeth met and hummed a straight, confident line. That sound stitched the day shut. I packed simply. Shoes, sweater sets, robe, prescription, 2 paperbacks. The folder labeled House, Trust. I added a tin of peppermint tea. Small comforts keep noise from masquerading as urgency. Back at the laptop, I searched the Ponte Vedra hotel I remembered from a lunch years ago. Clean lines, ocean light. I selected Ocean View Suite, completed the form, and pressed book. The cursor spun. Then certainty appeared like sunrise on water. Reservation confirmed. A second line glowed. Early check-in granted. 7:30 a.m. Before bed, I laid everything out on the desk the way I used to prep a storytime cart. Orderly, inviting, complete. I printed the hotel confirmation, and tucked it behind the trust papers. I wrote a small packing list on a sticky note and stuck it to the suitcase handle. Charger, glasses case, meds, tea. The peppermint candle in the kitchen had tunneled itself into a little ruby well. I pinched it out and let the smoke thread the room like punctuation. I checked my email once more. Arturo's reply marked itself with a brisk read receipt. Valeria's included a line about landing early. Both arrived the same night, which I underlined in my notebook so the timeline wouldn't drift in anyone's retelling. I forwarded Robert a brief summary and attached scans, then photographed the brass key on its ribbon for my records. Numbers, steady hands. Habits, steady hearts. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb and laid it face down on the nightstand. The chimes on the porch gave a last small answer to the dark. "Write it down, then go," I whispered, borrowing Mrs. Green's voice, and felt the words click into place like the new lock. Tomorrow would begin early and clean. A quiet ride over the bridge, a lobby smelling of coffee and salt, a key card that admitted me to a room with light enough to see exactly what mattered. The ocean keeps its own bookkeeping. Tides in, tides out. Mine would too. At 7:05 a.m., my taxi idled at the curb, its engine rumbling steady as a clock. At 7:06, my phone began its marathon. The first vibration buzzed against my palm just as I closed the car door. By the time we reached the bridge toward Pontevedra, the screen had filled with missed calls, half-formed voicemails, and texts that stacked like a tower about to fall. "Order takeout," I once joked when Brooke gushed about catering being beneath her brand. Today that offhand remark had become prophecy. I leaned back into the seat, breathing in the faint scent of vinyl warmed by winter sun. The marsh rushed past in gray-green streaks. I watched gulls scatter like torn pages over the water and told myself not to answer. Numbers speak louder than pleas, and I had left enough numbers behind in neat folders to outlast anyone's spin. By 7:30, I was at the hotel. The lobby smelled of coffee and salt air, the kind of mix that makes travelers believe they've landed in a postcard. A young desk clerk handed me the keycard with a smile too bright for the hour. I rode the elevator to an ocean view suite and dropped my suitcase on the carpet with the soft thud of finality. Breakfast arrived on a tray. Eggs Benedict, grapefruit wedges, a small pot of coffee. I carried it onto the balcony where the Atlantic stretched itself, endless and indifferent. My phone vibrated again. Brooke's voice, caught in voicemail this time, spiraled from shrill to shaky. "Everything's empty. Where's the china? The platters? You can't do this to me." I buttered my toast slowly. Let her panic. I had been panicked for years. Another message, minutes later, came through WhatsApp from a cousin I barely knew. A photo. Guests huddled in the dining room, eating off paper towels dyed red from the spiral ham's glaze. The fridge door yawned open in the background, its shelves bare except for condiments. Plastic cups lined the counter like soldiers, defeated. The caption, "What happened?" I sipped my coffee. The wind slid cold along the balcony rail, and I gripped it until my knuckles matched the egg's pale hollandaise. By mid-morning, Ryan's name filled the screen. I listened to one message. "Mom, please, Brooke's family is here. They're asking questions. Just, please, call me back." His voice cracked at the edge, but I let the message end in silence. A son's plea couldn't outweigh years of being treated like unpaid staff. Then Arturo called. His voice was clipped, controlled, but underneath I heard the scrape of disapproval. "Linda, tell me, were you behind the perfect parties all these years?" "Yes," I answered, watching the tide drag itself out. And behind the silence. He exhaled once, heavy, then said, "Valeria and I will be there by noon. Brooke has misled us. This is unacceptable." A beat later, Valeria herself rang. She wasted no time. "These documents you sent, do you realize this borders on identity fraud?" The words cut cleaner than the ocean wind. "Yes," I said quietly. That's why I sent them. She did not argue. She only said, "We'll see you soon. Bring the lawyer." After the call ended, I reached for the hotel notepad, its header printed in gold script. With my pen, I circled noon and wrote beneath it, firm strokes pressing through the page, courtroom, living room. The chimes from the porch back home would have been jangling frantic under so many footsteps, but here, only the sea answered me. My phone buzzed again, Brooke's name flashing, then Marco's terse text. "You've made a mess. Fix it." I set the device face down. I thought of Emma then, my granddaughter, Brooke's little girl, drawing Grandma's pie last Thanksgiving with crayons that bled beyond the paper. She had drawn me at the center, holding the platter as though it were a crown. That picture, taped on my fridge, had survived even Brooke's cleaning sprees. Children have a way of naming truth without knowing they've spoken it. I finished the last sip of coffee, folded the hotel napkin neatly, and stood. The tide dragged white foam over the sand in a line that looked like underlining. Noon would come quickly, and when it did, the living room of my own house would become a court where truth, not pageantry, set the rules. I closed the balcony door, let the phone buzz unanswered, and traced the circle I had drawn on the notepad with my fingertip. Noon. Courtroom. Living room. Christmas Eve, 11:58 a.m. The doorbell rang like a gavel. I stood in the hallway with the hotel notepad folded in my pocket. The words I'd written, courtroom equals living room, pressing against my palm like a reminder and a dare. I opened the door at noon exactly. Punctuality is a kind of verdict. The Florida winter sun came in thin and bright. I had pulled the blinds half closed so the light braided itself into stripes across the rug. The poinsettia on the coffee table looked ceremonial. Red bracts like seals, green leaves like signatures. I had carried folding chairs in from the garage and set them in a sober arc facing the sofa. Arturo entered first, coat over his arm, jaw set as if he'd driven the whole way on principle. Valeria followed, a slim folder in hand, her posture the exact height of disappointment. Marco came behind them with a look that mistook volume for authority. Ryan hovered at my shoulder, colorless with lack of sleep. Brooke took up the rear, brittle in a dress that had learned how to look expensive in bad light. "Why is the house unprepared?" Arturo didn't waste a greeting. The words hit the room and took a seat of their own. I gestured to the chairs. "Please," I said, and waited until they were seated. The silence was heavier than words. I could hear the blinds tap the window with each small push of the AC. Valeria's folder opened like a wing. She lifted a stack of pages, the very printouts I had sent, and let them ride the light. "These are yours?" she asked Brooke, though we all knew she was speaking to me first. "They're misunderstandings," Brooke said quickly. She grabbed for the word the way a person grabs for a railing that isn't there. "Miscommunications. We were going to explain. Ryan was going to talk to his mother. His mother is present," I said, to save Ryan from the sentence. I took the chair at the end of the arc, not the sofa, because witnesses do not recline. Robert Hanley slipped in with the lawyer's timing, 5 minutes late, unstagey. He nodded to me, to them, and set a leather folder on the coffee table beside the poinsettia, as if calling the first exhibit. "Good afternoon," he said. "I represent Mrs. Howell. We're here to clarify both expectations and ownership." Marco scoffed. "Ownership?" He spread his hands toward the undecorated room. "You call this ownership?" Robert didn't blink. He unclasped the folder and slid out a thin stack of crisp paper. "A revocable living trust now holds title to this residence with Mrs. Howell as trustee. A recorded deed restriction is in the county file. In practical terms, no sale, no mortgage, no transfer without written consent from the trustee. Additionally, residency is by permission only. Guests require invitation. Prolonged stays require written agreement. Past assumptions do not constitute present rights. Brooke's laugh was paper-thin. This is ridiculous. We're family. Family, Robert said, is a relationship. This is a property. He tapped the clause with a capped pen, and the room heard the period. Ryan tried to speak, then closed his mouth again. He looked at me with a boy's apology and a man's confusion. I offered him neither rescue nor punishment, just a steady place to set his eyes. Arturo leaned forward. So all the events, those dinners, those holidays Brooke told us she planned? I planned them, I said. I shopped, cooked, cleaned, she posted. I kept my voice even, a librarian reading a notice into a microphone. Clear, audible, boring to argue with. Valeria's gaze sliced to Brooke. You told us everything was handled. You asked for introductions, implied investment, sent photos. She flicked the stack once and the papers made a small thunder. Meanwhile, charges accumulated in Ryan's name and a loan referenced an anticipated inheritance. Brooke's chin lifted. I meant the natural course of things. The course of things, Robert said, runs through recorded instruments. He slid a copy of the deed restriction toward Arturo and Valeria. This is the instrument. I folded my hands. For 5 years, I said, I was your maid. I let the sentence stand. In the pause, I could hear the AC breathe. Then I added, Today, I'm your landlord. The line didn't feel cruel as I said it. It felt exact, the right notation on the right page. Brooke flushed so fast it looked like a rash. You can't talk to me like that in front of my family. I'm speaking about me, I said, and to you. I put my keys on the table, the brass one gleaming on its ribbon like an asterisk. Boundaries aren't insults, they're labels. Arturo turned to Brooke again, and the kindness in his face had moved out and left a forwarding address. Why did you tell us Linda would underwrite the holiday? Why did you promise a dinner she never agreed to host? Brooke spread her hands, the gesture she uses on Instagram when she explains. I assumed. Assumptions are not agreements, Valeria cut in. Her voice was low, a metronome set to patience. You built a brand on borrowed labor, Brooke. Now the bill is due. Ryan's voice finally found itself. Mom, I didn't know about the cards, I swear. He looked at Robert, then at Arturo. I didn't know about the loan either. I believe you, I said, because I did. Belief is not amnesty, it's a starting point. Robert cleared his throat. To be plain, Mrs. Howell is not seeking law enforcement. She has, however, secured her home and clarified access. Any misrepresentation tied to credit will be addressed directly with lenders as needed. I advise all parties to cease using the phrase anticipated inheritance in financial contexts. It invites scrutiny you do not want. Marco bristled. So what are we supposed to do? Eat off paper towels all weekend? You're welcome to hire a caterer, I said, or cook. That's not the point, Brooke snapped. The point is image. I looked at the poinsettia. It's red like a controlled burn. Images are for cameras. Reality is for contracts. Robert slid a final page to the center of the table. One more item. Residency by permission. Mrs. Howell reserves the right to revoke permission at any time. Starting today, entry is by invitation. Keys will be surrendered and reissued at the trustee's discretion. Brooke's head snapped toward me. You can't be serious. I'm 66, I said. Serious is the only thing I am reliably. The room's temperature shifted. Not colder exactly, but clearer, the way air feels after a storm. Valeria set the statements down and folded her hands. Linda, thank you for your clarity. She looked at Brooke. We will speak privately as a family this evening. You will return funds you borrowed using false premises. You will apologize to relatives you misled. Brooke gave a short, helpless laugh that wasn't a laugh. You're turning on me? No, Arturo said. We are turning toward the truth. For a moment, we all listened to the little sounds houses make when they aren't full of music. Refrigerator hum, a pipe settling somewhere, the faint tap of a blind against glass. Then Brooke stood too fast, her chair legs scraping the floor like an objection that didn't find a rule. She headed for the kitchen, shoulders square, heels rapid fire. "Brooke!" I called after her, not to stop her, but to set a final pin. She paused in the doorway, a silhouette in borrowed light. "Return the spare keys when you go." I kept my voice gentle. There is a way to say a boundary that allows the other person to keep their face. We all heard the cupboard door open, a beat, the sound of porcelain sliding against wood, and then the sharp crash of a coffee cup shattering on tile, echoing down the hallway like a gavel's last strike. No one moved. Robert closed his folder. Marco stared at the doorway as if he could force the scene to reverse by glare alone. Ryan looked at his hands. Arturo sighed. Valeria pinched the bridge of her nose the way people do when they have decided to stop pretending. I stood, collected the brass key from the table, and slipped it back onto the ribbon at my wrist. The poinsettia's red seemed redder. The blind's stripes looked like lines on a page waiting for signatures. "Thank you for coming," I said to the room. "We're adjourned." From the kitchen, a new silence bled into the old one, tense as steam. The house held its breath. Then, somewhere deep in the pantry, a second, smaller clink answered the first. Christmas dinner was supposed to be turkey. Instead, it was truth served cold. The smell of Costco rotisserie chickens drifted through my dining room like a last-minute apology, rich and salty, riding air that should have carried cloves and rosemary. Grease bled through paper towels pretending to be napkins. The red spiral of ham glaze had already left faint stains on the edge of the table like an annotation. No centerpiece, no china, no curated backdrop. Only chairs pulled close and faces set to proceed. Brooke stood at the head of the table as if a crown might materialize if she held still long enough. Her dress had lost its argument with the day. Her mascara had chosen sides with gravity. When she lifted a chin at the cousins, nothing lifted with it. "Let's at least eat," she said, brittle as hard candy. No one reached first. Even the baby at the far end seemed to sense the mood and quieted into the soft, wary silence that makes rooms echo. Arturo took the seat beside me, shoulders square, eyes level. Valeria sat opposite Brooke with a folder, the same one she had waved in the living room. Marco kept to the edge, elbows wide, phone face down, as if that alone made him blameless. Ryan slid into the chair to my right, a pause. The extended relatives formed a quiet jury. A dozen lives with their own bills and hopes, now drafted into a hearing they had not requested but clearly understood. Brooke once declared, "Image is everything." Tonight, the image was unraveling stitch by stitch. You could hear it in the soft scrape of plastic forks on paper plates, in the whisper of paper towels soaking grease, in the way people watched rather than posed. I poured water into clear cups, the kind we keep for picnics, and the action steadied my hands. Serving is a habit. Witnessing is a choice. Valeria opened the folder. She didn't dramatize, she itemized. "Brooke borrowed $20,000 from family," she said, each word laid down like a tile, straight and square. She said an inheritance would make everyone whole. She named a house that is not hers. She sent photos of parties and said she planned them. Valeria placed the printouts in a single neat stack. "This is not an image problem. This is an ethics problem." Marco leaned in, anger ready like a struck match. "I spent weeks evaluating properties because you said there was a runway for investment," he told Brooke. "I booked viewings, called favors. It was smoke. Do you know how that makes me look with my contacts?" Brooke's laugh came out too sharp to be laughter. "Do you all hear yourselves? This is a family matter. Linda is making it performative because she wants attention. She's destroying me." She gestured at the room, as if the undecorated space had been my act of vandalism rather than my act of truth. "I'm not destroying you," I said. "I'm telling the truth about me." I let the rotisserie smell do the rest of the talking. Warm, practical, unpretentious. You can feed a crowd on chicken and quiet if the crowd is ready to hear. Arturo cleared his throat, and the table recognized the sound the way classrooms recognize the bell. "Financial support is withdrawn," he said. "Whatever possibilities existed for Ryan's business are off the table until we see transparency and restitution. Brooke, you sought leverage with our family name. You won't find it." Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at the chicken as if it might give instructions. "I didn't know about the cards," he said softly. "I didn't know about the loan." The words were small, but they arrived like a man finding his mouth after weeks of fog. Valeria turned a page. "Some accounts were opened using your information, Ryan. Anticipated inheritance appears on a lender form. That phrase invites scrutiny. It also invites consequences." Brooke's eyes flashed. "I was building a life for us. Everyone does what they have to do." "Everyone does not," Valeria replied, measured but final. "And when they do, they pay it back." She set down her pen. "You will return the 20,000 you borrowed under false premises. You will explain the cards." Around us, plates moved. Meat fell away from bone in obedient shreds. The ordinary work of dinner continued as the work of honesty threaded through the room. Nothing dramatic, only the sound of truth taking its seat and making itself comfortable. Brooke turned toward me. "Say something," she ordered, as if I were a faucet she could turn on for comfort. "Tell them this is petty. Tell them you overreacted." I kept my gaze steady. "I won't." She tried Ryan next. "Tell them we're fine." Ryan's silence did something words rarely do. It drew a bright line. He rubbed his thumb against the seam of his cup until the plastic protested. Shame colored his face. Slow, then all at once, like a tide that finally stops pretending it isn't coming. He looked at me, then at the stack of paper, then at the floor. I placed my palm on the table, flat. "Son, I love you," I said, the sentence as old as his first scraped knee. "But what kind of man do you want to be?" A tiny sound escaped him, half breath, half admission. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The not answer changed the room more than any speech could have. Arturo pushed back his chair slightly, not rudely, just enough to mark decision. "Here's where we are. There will be no checks, no introductions, no gloss." His eyes softened a fraction when he glanced at Ryan. "There can still be repair, but not while lies run the calendar." Marco, for once, didn't add fuel. He stared at the rotisserie tray and said, quieter than expected, "You wasted people's time. That's a debt, too." The extended relatives did what families do when storms pass over a table. They resumed eating, gentler now, as if careful not to disturb the structure rebuilding itself in the open. Someone passed me a roll. I buttered it and tasted salt and relief. Brooke tried one last time to conjure the older script. "You're all humiliating me," she whispered, breaking eye contact with the room like a performer who misses her mark. "You've turned my husband against me. You'll regret this." No one answered. The baby's spoon tapped once against a paper plate, a light punctuation. The smell of chicken hung on the air, patient as Sunday. Ryan exhaled and looked at his hands. Valeria capped her pen. Arturo folded the folder. Marco slid his phone toward the center as though surrendering a weapon that hadn't helped him anyway. I reached for the water pitcher. The plastic flexed in my fingers, and a small thread of cold poured into my cup. "Eat," I said, not commanding, just inviting. "It's still dinner." The relatives nodded like people who have remembered how to be human in a room that was trying to be a courtroom and a dining room at once. The ceiling vent whispered. Outside, a late gull crossed the square of window, the white of its belly catching sun. I held the cup in both hands to keep them from shaking, not with fear, but with the unsteady relief that follows a final, honest sentence. When I set it down, A ring of moisture printed the wood like a seal. We cleared plates in quiet paper towels gathered like surrender flags. Someone pressed leftovers into foil, practical grace. In the doorway to the kitchen, Brooke paused, as if the trim around the frame could still confide in her. It didn't. She disappeared into clatter and came back empty-handed. I folded one more towel over the lip of the trash bag and tied it shut. Tomorrow, I said to no one and everyone, we keep the parts that hold. A few heads nodded. A few shoulders lowered. The house, which had been holding its breath since noon, let it out slowly. Brooke stood a long moment, eyes glassy, anger cooling into something smaller. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and in the quiet after that, even her heels seemed to give up the performance and simply stand on the floor like ordinary shoes. Top of form. The morning after, the Florida sky was mercilessly clear. Blue so bright, it made leftover worries look out of season. The porch boards held a little dawn cool, and the herb pots, basil, rosemary, mint, let off small, faithful scents when I brushed them with my hand. From the community pool came the faint slap of water and a child's squeal, as if the world had decided to forgive us by noon. 2 houses over, Mrs. Green's wind chimes practiced their scales. The house breathed the way houses do when people inside have started telling the truth. On my desk, the brass key hung from its red ribbon like metal someone finally decided I'd earned. Yesterday, it locked away heirlooms, china, linens, the red band platter with my grandmother's fingerprint trapped beneath glaze. Today, it meant something simpler. Permission is a system. Thresholds are doors, not metaphors, when you are 66 and determined. Robert arrived at 10 with a leather folder and a travel mug that said World's Okayest Golfer. He lifted the folder like verdict. Paperwork's recorded, he said. Trust on the county index. Deed restriction scanned and searchable. Residency by permission. Enforceable. He sat at the porch table, turned it into a desk, and slid copies toward me. His pen paused over the line I had already memorized. No sale, mortgage, or transfer without my written consent. I don't expect a fight, he added, but expectation isn't a plan. This is a plan. I signed twice and initialed 3 times, labeling the packet copy because clerks like labels, and so do I. Robert asked about police reports for the credit pulls. Not today, I said. Clarity first. Consequences later, if needed. He nodded with the small relief of a man who likes clear sequence. When he left, I walked him to the door. The poinsettia had dropped another bract, but looked sturdier for it. Less costume, more plant. Folding chairs waited by the garage door like closed questions. On the runner lay the spare key Brooke had returned, shy as an apology. I set it face up in the kitchen drawer and let the quiet name it lesson. Ryan knocked at 11 instead of breezing in, upgrade noted. He had shaved badly. His eyes wore the color of long nights. Mom, he said, carefully spoken. He stood just inside the threshold and studied the room that had tried to be courtroom and dining room at once. I should have seen it. I wish you had, I answered, not to wound, but to keep the picture in focus. I poured coffee and slid a cup across. He stared into it a moment, then asked, What now? Now we follow the terms, I said. She returns what she borrowed. You add credit alerts, read every document, and learn where your yes ends. And you come for dinner when you're invited. He swallowed. I'll fix what I can, he said, and I'm sorry for what I can't. Apologies can chase verdicts or invite repair. His chose the second. I rested a hand on his shoulder and let it be enough. You're my son, I said. That's not a contract. It's a biography. Biographies get revised. He nodded, asked about Emma's pickup, and left as he'd come, with a knock. By noon, the house had found its natural volume. I wrapped leftover chicken, rinsed knives, watered the basil until the soil went from dull to dark. The suitcase on my bed held only peppermint tea and a finished paperback. I returned it to the closet beside the storage bin where the china napped. The airline tag, Jax, MIA, still hung from the handle. Some journeys are better as souvenirs. A small set of footsteps pattered up the walk, then the quick double wrap I know by heart. Emma. Leggings with candy canes, a sweatshirt with a sequined star that flipped from gold to silver when she brushed it. In her arms, a puzzle box as wide as her grin. "Grandma, can we start the puzzle?" We started cookies first. She hauled the stool to the counter and supervised like a foreman. Butter softened, sugar fluffed, flour clouded the air. I showed her how to level a cup with the back of a knife. She caught a chocolate chip mid-roll with one triumphant finger. The oven warmed the house the way December allows, less from need than ritual. While trays rotated, she drew at the table. Another pie, this one with a brass key floating above it like a halo. "Is that the magic key?" she asked. "It's the respect key," I said. "It keeps the right people in and the wrong ideas out." She nodded gravely. "Some ideas need time out." We ate the first cookies too hot. Chocolate turned to lava. Paper towels showing faint circles of butter like little moons. I set my phone face down, but read 2 messages. From Robert, index updated, certified copies next week, and from Valeria, funds transfer initiated, proof to follow. The air inside my lungs loosened another notch. I looped the brass ribbon around my wrist the way girls do with hair ties they don't want to lose. We poured puzzle sky onto the table. Pieces chimed together like utensils in a drawer. "Edges first," I said. "Edges give shape to the middle." "Like rules," she said, not making it a metaphor, which is the best way to tell the truth. A lighter knock came mid-afternoon. Brooke stood on the mat, makeupless, jacket folded. She didn't cross the threshold. The porch railing drew a tidy border. She set the jacket on the chair and studied the herb pots, as if smaller problems were practice for larger ones. "I left the key yesterday," she said. "I found it," I answered. "Thank you." She cleared her throat. "I'm doing the transfers. Valeria sent instructions." Her eyes slid toward the table where Emma hummed. "Can I—" "Not today," I said, soft but angled. "Text Ryan. We'll plan it." The old script would have added of course and whenever. The new one kept its verbs short. She nodded. Small. Real. "Merry Christmas," she said, and walked back down the path, shoes ordinary on the concrete. I stood beneath the little hook over the desk and unknotted the ribbon. The brass key flashed once in the window light and settled into its place. "Respect," I told the quiet room and the noisy world beyond it, "is the only gift that lasts past Christmas." The chimes gave a bright agreement. The pool answered with a splash. Somewhere, a gull complained about being a gull and kept flying. We worked the puzzle until the lighthouse had shoulders and the sky a spine. When restlessness arrived, we boxed the pieces that remained and wrote "to be continued" on a sticky note. Emma loves a promise. So do I when I'm the one making it. I walked her to the door through late light. She turned back with the box hugged to her chest, like a story that won't be rushed. "Grandma?" she asked, tilting her head toward the table. "Can we start the puzzle?" "We already did," I laughed. She shook her head, solemn. "No, I mean the next one." There it was. The future, knocking lightly, bringing its own edges. I opened the door wider and let the air come in. The brass key still hangs above my desk, shining quiet proof that boundaries can be gifts too. In this life, family isn't measured by how perfect the table looks, but by the respect we give each other when the plates are cleared. I've learned that dignity, once claimed, makes room for love to grow steadier, even after storms. If this story touched something in your own heart, I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. Share a memory, a lesson, or simply stay with us for the next chapter of conversation. Bottom of form.